Welcome back. Some experts say China could surpass the United States as the world's largest economy in the next 5 years or so. Whether that happens or not will depend a lot on the leaders. China's Communist Party is scheduled to undergo a massive transfer of power this year. And in the United States, President Obama is likely to face a closer contest than he may have originally expected. In this next report, we take a closer look at the two major political shifts.
China is preparing for its once-in-a-decade transition of power that will take place later this year. It is a controlled change during which the older generation of communist leaders passes on the reins to the younger generation. The last time this happened was in 2003. However, according to some experts, not much will change in China. They say outgoing leaders will likely not want to do anything controversial and risk their reputation as they step down from power. Incoming leaders will probably do the same while competing for top spots in the new administration. But other analysts think that there will be some change with the incoming younger generation. Although the changes may not be drastic, there could be a chance of seeing more forward-thinking policy, a willingness to engage with the international community and liberalize certain policies.
How important is this position in China, or does it really matter for Chinese with the politics and economy?
I think it matters a huge great deal for the Chinese as well as for the global scene, and certainly in between that for Asia as well. As we've been hearing in this transition period, the current president and the prime minister, especially in Beijing, has been advocating greater reforms, more deregulation, especially on the economic front. There was a World Bank report that was undertaken between the Chinese government and the World Bank, mapping out China's liberalization programs. So it would matter a great deal, especially in terms of employment within China, in terms of making a transition from a very export-driven economy to more domestic spending, more domestic savings, and focus on driving the domestic economy, driving the Chinese economic growth.
Yeah, it seems to be like China is in a stage where they need refinement in the economy. Like you said, there's been such a strong emphasis on export, but now to try and increase the infrastructure and also creating more jobs and opportunities, it's a very vital time. Do we have any signs of China wanting to make those changes, or is it going to continue in the path that they have been, that has seemed to work for them so far?
I think there's a clear sign that they are serious and that they might even intensify the reform process as the economic growth slows down in China. Prime Minister Wen Jiabao has been talking about these, greater liberalization, greater emphasis on the domestic economy, restructuring banks, bringing private capital into the banking sector. So yes, I think definitely they're trying to generate more in foreign investment as well as domestic capital into a very state-dominated economy that is still very much in the hands of the state-owned enterprises. And that model will not change, but certainly they are creating more space for private investment within China, as opposed to the money going out of China and attracting more foreign investment into the economy.
China's current leadership has recently expressed interest in enhancing relations with Iran. It even put on a public display of solidarity with Russia when President Vladimir Putin visited China recently. These alliances work very much against Western-led policies. China opposes an attack on Iran and outside intervention in Syria. So the political path that the new Chinese leader chooses to follow will have wide-reaching effects on global issues. In the United States, the former governor of Massachusetts, Mitt Romney, has pretty much secured the spot of the Republican candidate for the presidential election. His official nomination will come at the Republican National Convention in August. The Republican primaries were seen as long and divisive, but former Sri Lankan ambassador to the United States, Devendra Subasinghe, says it is not that much different from what Obama and Hillary Clinton went through in the Democratic primaries in 2008. Republican Party members are now beginning to rally around their probable candidate, and because of their collective desire to defeat Obama, supporters are pouring in money for the Romney campaign. During the 2008 presidential election, Obama made headlines for his ability to raise funds far more than any of the other candidates. But it looks like he will have a strong competitor in Romney. During the month of May, Romney and the Republican Party raised more than $76 million, while Obama and the Democratic Party raised $60 million. It was the first time that a Republican candidate was able to raise more campaign funds than President Obama. Most of these funds will be used to attack each other on their records.
But it's interesting that Obama's strength, and he has an amazing campaign team. Their campaign was revolutionary, especially in their journey towards the White House. And it seems like that same machine is now getting oiled back again, and they're getting back in business. And what are areas that you think they'll really go after Governor Romney? And vice versa, how would the Romney campaign take on the Obama administration? Yes, the economy is still weak. Yes, the Obama administration has taken decisions that may have worked or may not have worked. How are the two candidates going to go after each other, and what are some of the key areas you can foresee right now?
It'll be their records. Romney will definitely criticize Obama's performance as president, that perhaps he was too weak and too accommodating in the foreign policy field, not leading as America should, and domestically that he's gotten the government much more involved in day-to-day economic affairs, and especially holding out the healthcare reform bill that has still yet to prove itself. President Obama, in turn, will definitely focus on Governor Romney's record in Massachusetts. As the governor, did he generate jobs? Did he really shrink government as he promised to? And so on, the basic principles on which he ran as governor. And ironically, the Obama White House did borrow heavily on the Governor Romney's reforms of the state healthcare system in Massachusetts, so there'll be some ironies being played out here. And they certainly will go critique him on Bain Capital, the private equity firm that he managed and ran, for having kind of put people out of work by doing the turnarounds, rescuing companies by either taking on a lot of debt or laying off workers. So I think this is going to be interesting. And as an adjunct to that, Governor Romney's father was the governor of Michigan, and this is the major automotive manufacturing state in the U.S. Governor Romney was against the bailout of of GM and the other major automotive companies that Obama put in place, and that has cost him a lot in terms of his support in what would be his second or third home state. And Obama will definitely point that out, that he was willing to take a hard stand, as he did as Bain Capital, to lay people off and not rescue the automotive industry in the U.S.
If President Obama ends up with being a one-term president, if he does not make it in this election, what are certain reasons that you feel would have led to that situation from his side and decisions he made in his administration?
It's definitely going to be a close election. I think if there's one issue that really would define it, it would be the healthcare reform bill, where some argue it has caused overreach on the part of the government getting into the healthcare sector and not really driven the cost benefits and the coverage benefits that he promised. I think that would be one defining issue that could work against him. The second issue is not necessarily of his own influence, but the very slow recovery, very slow the decline in the unemployment rate is just hovering around 8%, and that's going to be the bigger issue, I think, than healthcare, and that is not something he had any control over. He inherited a financial crisis. He fixed the banking sector. He bailed out some of the larger companies, such as the auto companies, but there's not much the U.S. government at the federal level or even a state level do to generate jobs, because much of the jobs in the U.S. are generated by small and medium scale industries, and the others, the larger manufacturing sector. The manufacturing sector has undergone a major transformation. Much of the jobs going off to low-cost manufacturing bases, you can't bring those back. So they're going to have to focus, as Obama has done, on green energy, those types of technologies that are taking a higher level of skills and knowledge. But that is not going to happen overnight.
Romney's acute business sense will play an important role in the campaign, especially as the Obama administration continues to struggle with an ailing economy. However, Ambassador Subasinghe warns that CEO credentials may not be enough to run a country.
But talking about Romney, some of his credentials that brings to the table, obviously, was the governor of Massachusetts and had certain amount of success that obviously his campaign is trying to really hype up and show to the people. But at the same time, as a person in the business community, and he constantly says that the person has created so many jobs and opportunities and so on and so forth, do you think that translates into being the executive leader of the country and translating all of those into creating jobs and stabilizing the economy in its current state?
He's going to have a broader message. Being a CEO of Bain Capital, a private equity venture capital firm, is not the same thing as running the U.S. government, and it's a very different. But he will bring to the job, should he get elected, skills that would be business-oriented, pro-business. I think his critique of Obama is also that he has over-regulated, over-responded to the financial crisis and the meltdown that took place, over-regulating banks, over-regulating the corporate sector, and that's costing the businesses money that is then in turn resulting in the inability to hire more workers. So that's his point, that the government should not be in the business of over-regulating business sector, and that probably will be his primary critique of Obama's economic policies overall.
Other than the economy, certain social issues will also likely play some role in the elections this year. Same-sex marriage could be one issue.
I think same-sex couples should be able to get married.
I do not favor marriage between people of the same gender.
While Romney's position has stayed the same, many question the impact Obama's shift towards supporting same-sex marriage would have on his re-election bid. However, Ambassador Subasinghe is fairly confident that social issues will play a secondary role in elections. He thinks even those Democrats who are against such issues as same-sex marriage will end up rallying around Obama when it comes time to vote.
One thing that's been getting a lot of attention with the US election now is President Obama's stance on certain conservative issues or certain social issues that have got the conservatives even more rattled up than before, especially with the whole endorsing of gay marriage. Now, how is this going to play? Was this a wise decision for Obama to come out, or would it have been better for him to be on the fence and be ambiguous about it and potentially have the independents continued on his side, or is this not going to be a factor at all?
I don't think it really would be a factor. I don't know for a fact, but I would assume that the President Obama's re-election campaign did some very, very intensive polling on this issue and must have concluded that it's going to be more to his advantage to mobilize the base in comparison to the social conservative voters that he would be losing. The African American churches have spoken against it, his policy on recognizing gay marriage, but I think at the end of the day they will rally around him. The African American community has, of course, been a strong base for the first African American president of the United States.
US elections could be one of the most difficult to predict. In the early years of Obama's presidency, with the euphoria of the Yes We Can campaign still lingering, many felt that the first African American president would be unbeatable in 2012. But that has changed. Even with the death of Osama bin Laden and the passing of the healthcare legislation, the November election could be a closer race than anyone had predicted.
The issue that appears to be a factor in most elections taking place around the world is the economy. And with so many countries going to the polls, including some of the most powerful nations in the world, the political shifts that take place will most definitely have an impact on the direction of the global economy. So these elections in faraway places could very well decide whether we continue to feel that pinch on our wallets or see some relief in the next few years. And with that, we wrap up this edition of Global Perspectives. Be sure to visit us on YouTube at youtube.com/newsfirstsri Lanka. We'll see you again next week at the same time on MTV Sports. Thank you for joining us and good night.